Hi, I'm Paula Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. This show is about exploring consciousness, and it's about exploring how we create our reality. What is the nature of our power over the world that we have, or understanding how we're involved in the world that's around us. The relationship of the individual to the environment. One of my all-time absolute favorite topics is the Shroud of Turin, because this document, the burial shroud of Jesus, gives us hope if understood in a very deep way, in a scientific way, and a multidisciplinary way, and a vision of new possibilities. So today I'm very happy to have with me Dr. JJ Hurtak, who is a double PhD in both the hard sciences as well as the social sciences. And JJ, welcome to Farther Down the Rabbit Hole.
It's great to be here with such a provocative subject that needs really to be understood in terms of the cosmic picture.
Right. And I find oftentimes people can either be intimidated by scientists or capitulate too easily to information that they don't understand themselves. And the Shroud of Turin has often been considered an object of faith or devotion, and that it's not of much use to scientists. And yet the more I look and the more I show friends or people around me who are interested in many of the topics that I'm interested in, politics, creating a better world, creating a more equitable distribution of wealth, when they look at it, they go, my goodness, there is more here. And so helping them to connect with the evidence is something that I think we as media people can do. And I'm excited by the Academy for Future Sciences, because I think the original scientists, and we'll go into this in our discussions, some of them have now died, and you had private discussions with them. So that's
I had the opportunity, as you know, to know Don Lin, principal scientist at Jet Propulsion Lab,
right,
who was involved with the image enhancements back in the mid-'70s. I have had the opportunity also to know many other specialists like John DeSalvo and others who've been connected with studies 1988 and more in recent times that have looked at the pros and cons of why the shroud is such an interesting artifact. Does it speak of the larger picture of evolution? Are we evolving as a humanity into what could be called the next level of consciousness? And is this consciousness somehow connected with what we will call, in the new language of science, superluminal light or high-speed light events that can be captured, as in this case, I believe, in the actual vesture itself?
Right. Why don't we right away go with a roll-in, because what I wanted to address is the carbon dating. That's something that has been a source of so much confusion. The carbon dating that was originally done was done when?
Well, the carbon dating goes back, the three major studies that were done in the late 1980s suggested that the cloth was somewhere between 1260 and 1390 AD in its composition. And the arguments suggest that this was simply a border strip that was taken and added onto the cloth. It was not really the original material itself,
right,
which is why we need a multidisciplinary approach to look at this from the standpoint of high energy physics, culture history, fabric analysis, and the paraphysical dimension. So what we're going to see now is a very important statement of ongoing research with the shroud.
Okay, great. So let's...
In 1988, carbon dating tests concluded that the shroud was no more than 600 years old. This seemed to put an end to scientific inquiry into the cloth. Many theories were advanced why the test might be wrong, but few scientists were convinced. Then, microbiologist Dr. Garza Valdez announced a significant discovery, a coating he found on ancient cloth fibers caused by bacteria, which can distort carbon dating. In 1996, he tested a few fibers of the shroud and found enough of this coating to skew significantly the carbon dating results.
There he is.
Physicist Dr. Harry Gove is the inventor of the modern technique for carbon dating.
this bacterial contamination is something that the people who did the carbon dating were not aware of. In fact, I don't think anyone was aware of it until Garza Valdez discovered this possibility. Even if they had been aware of it, the cleaning procedure that they used would not have taken care of it. So there was no way that they could have made an absolutely unequivocal date of the shroud material.
With the results of the carbon dating now in question, scientists are already at work finding a way to separate the bioplastic coating from the original linen.
When the procedure for separating the cellulose from the bioplastic coating is well established, then I think we would be prepared to offer to do another carbon date on the shroud. Whether the offer will be accepted is not at all clear.
Great. I really like that end part because he's such a nice man, and he goes, as soon as they figure out a way to make it accurate, they will offer to the Catholic Church to do another dating. And he goes, whether they'll accept it or not is another thing, because it must have been very traumatic on all sides about this being
genius in his own right, having invented the particle accelerator, having looked at a whole new process of separating carbon-14 samples from those that might be called carbon-12 samples. The whole aspect is to realize that within the hollow fibers there are lumens, or factors of measurement, that can determine quite accurately the earlier age of the cloth if it's to be made. I think what is even more profound is an article in the Journal of Optics published in April 2004 by two Italian scientists, Fanti and Maggiolo, that look at what is called a second image of the face, which is underneath the cloth. So we're not simply talking about a surface image, only one image that is the front view, but underneath the cloth itself, which was never permitted until recent time by Catholic authority, of a second image. However faint, it does show the outline of the face and very clear detail of the eyes.
How do they know there's a second image there?
Well, you can see it in the actual scientific report. The Journal of Optics.
In other words, you've got fibers.
You have fibers,
down.
And this
and
suggests that the image, as I had mentioned in earlier programs, is holistic. In other words, the light radiation wraps around the whole molecular structure of the cloth.
Right.
So it's not simply one of the surface, but also of the subsurface level of image impression, image radiation.
Because they said when they looked at the fibers, one fiber right next to another might be, have the color and the other wouldn't.
Correct.
On the surface, but you're saying like underneath, maybe there'd be different variations?
Yes. And that's why it's so important that we have a multidisciplinary team, because the fibers were much closer together in their weave in the first century than in the Middle Ages. And so fibers closer together would be darker, would hold more of the paint or the substance of body fluids.
Right, but there is no paint, right?
There is no paint.
There is no body fluid.
The evidences of 1977, 78 show there was not any vapor image or paint image that was put on the surface of the shroud. However, the tests that were done in 1988, some 10 years later, by 3 different groups, suggested that the cloth was merely from the Middle Ages, and we're arguing that this is simply from a strip that was sewn onto the cloth itself. That if we look clearly at the subsurface aspect of the cloth fibers, you will see a second image. Now this is very profound because it suggests something that is clearly recognizable in a book titled De Pistis Sophia, a copy of which you have for the audience, which means in the ancient Greek faith and wisdom, the teaching of the risen Christ to his disciples as recorded in the late 2nd and 3rd century. These are disciples of disciples who speak of the risen Christ, who appears to them now in a risen state, explaining the symbolism of the vesture.
Isn't this the closest we have to the Divine Mother? The understanding of the feminine, the Pistis Sophia?
Pistis Sophia basically speaks of the female disciples that Jesus had, primarily Mary Magdalene, and the female nature of the soul within. And so what he is saying in the teaching, if I can show this to the television camera, is that there is a vesture within a vesture. As you see here, a body upon a cross. This is the so-called tree of life, the symbolism of the energy points of the body. If you look carefully where my fingers are pointing, you will see that there is a...
We're here?
Yes, an image within an image. This is called the twin savior. Now, in the Pistis Sophia text, which is written in both the ancient Greek and Coptic language, Jesus begins his discourse by saying the vesture existed prior to his crucifixion and was left behind as as a symbol of the light of glory that we must understand in the process of the higher evolutionary experience.
Now, JJ, that's really esoteric, and I know you've had profound experiences, but what would your fellow scientists say about the second image? I mean, you could show it to him with measurement, with instruments, right?
Right.
If the Catholic Church would let this cloth be scrutinized with endoscopes or whatever the machine is called,
yes,
and they would see a second image,
yes,
that you would then claim, based on your esoteric knowledge and what you teach at the Academy of Future Sciences, that this came from where? It was just he carried another body, but
this vesture, according to the ancient texts found in Egypt, suggest that the vesture,
that means cloth, or it means clothes,
or the shroud.
Okay.
I'm using these words interchangeably.
Right.
Is a human product, but it shows a transhuman experience of transmuting the physical dimension into the supernatural dimension.
Okay.
In other words,
I think everybody recognizes it's not a normal cloth.
Right.
Because the scientists can't find any paint, any evidence of how the image is made.
What I'm saying
possibly
here,
a radiation that came out of a dead...
Precisely. The cloth image of radiation is more important than the image of the fabric itself with the blood material, the human byproducts.
Of course.
So what we're saying here, if you look at a book that has been forgotten, that now has been found, clearly the teaching of Jesus was, look at my vesture, look at the shroud within the shroud,
right,
to understand the whole experience of the greater light transmutation.
I think it's not, I don't think people get excited about the blood. I think it's just the blood and the scourgings and the specific anatomical, record of the suffering just indicates that whoever it was died. That it was a really beat up body, beat up to the point of death, beat up to the point that it's standing on the threshold of what all of humanity's greatest fear is, which is the fear of death, and that the resurrection means it's overcome.
Right.
That's the excitement. So this second image is the hope. Or hope even sounds too vague. If it's scientifically looked at, you can say, yes, it can be done. And Michal Ledwith was saying that in Egyptian science or knowledge, even the physical temples had different teachings. And the temple at Heliopolis was about having mastered all that you have to master in this lifetime, for the soul then to be qualified to take the body beyond death. Would that make sense?
It does make sense. And the whole aspect of transmuting one's physical energy into the next stage of creation is what I believe is the inner teaching or the secret teaching of Jesus in this lost text, the Pistis Sophia. We take faith and put faith and wisdom to work. We realize the way of the cross is transcending our physical cross, our body, which is shaped like a cross. Our consciousness is crucified to our body when we are born. And as we go into the next stage of evolution, we transmute this energy. And so this is the perfect symbol that goes with the cross, which is the shroud. However you interpret it through whatever scientific tool, it is clear that there is an image within the image, which the ancient Coptic text speaks of. So this was known not only to the early Christians, but also to the other Hermetic schools of the Middle East, principally that of Heliopolis, or the ancient Academy of On, that spoke of this greater light upon the head. Right. Now, if we look at this process of what Jesus is teaching through the divine names, which he connects with the vestment, we will see is illustrated in this picture of this person, myself, speaking in Tulum, Mexico several years ago, that when the divine names were uttered,
Right,
suddenly
you were
a
saying,
paraphysical light burst took place around my body, which is to say that all of us have this unique ability of Christ consciousness to transmute the
right,
essence of our life into the next extension. Paraphysically speaking, life, or the material form of our life, our body, is gravitationally trapped light. In other words, we are able to release this light burst, and apparently this is what the Christ did when he was taken off the cross. If we are to put together the research of Dr. Jackson and Jumper, who were able to look beneath the fibers through image enhancement and see the three-dimensional image of the Christ face appear out of the cloth in a state of weightlessness, surrounded by what is called superluminal light burst.
right. That's a whole nother show, I think, because when Jumper and Jackson were showing that, unlike a photograph of you and me, where the photograph just shows light and dark, the machine doesn't show how distant the image is from the lens.
Right.
But Jumper's and Jackson's machine, do you know what the machine is called? I don't.
Well, there's various types of technical language.
Yeah, but it shows the distance, so it means that even a photograph of the shroud's image
Right.
had a record of it, of exact distance, and so therefore you could recreate the face.
And they were able to
the
do this by
body.
taking the image and putting it on a 1/8 inch cardboard display with the dots, and then put cameras at a certain distance so that they could recreate the image of a living body on
Right.
the cross, showing the reflective differences and distances.
It's really amazing. It's like, as old as that shroud is, it's only now being appreciated because of science, because of these methods.
According
To
to
look at it.
John Jackson, he believes that the image upon the shroud was created while the body of Jesus was taken from the physical dimension into the transphysical or transnatural, supernatural dimensions. As the body passed through the shroud, the body itself was absorbed in a special way of high particle infusion into the cloth itself.
Well, that's an interesting perspective, but I know people who separate resurrection from ascension would say they don't necessarily have to take place at the same time. But who knows? I mean, this is the kind of thing that I would think an Academy for Future Sciences would be a perfect platform to invite that type of discussion. I think what interests me is that here, as we know Jesus, he was well connected. He obviously had great abilities. Michal Ledwith and others believed that he had spent many years in India with many different masters, mastering the miracles, so that he could finally have the ability to do the greatest, which is raise his body with the power of his Holy Spirit alone, not raising someone else's body like what he did with Lazarus. But he wasn't in perfect condition. He'd gone through the death process. He allowed his body to be beat up horribly, whereas he could have said, well, I cannot irritate these people so much to get it to such an extent where they would come after me. He would have been savvy and wise enough to have avoided that. But it seems as though he had this engagement with destiny that would allow him to do something extraordinarily different than what had been done in human sacrifice before. Because it seems when you have people crucified and you have them up there, and it makes the rest of the population be in terror, and they all submit to whatever they're wanting, whoever is powerful enough to crucify them wants them to submit to. So when you have an example of someone who goes beyond this process, it's significant in so many different directions.
Well, we all know through culture history that there are hundreds of thousands of examples of crucifixion during the Roman period. However, this example, which I believe is, if it's not the Christ, it's certainly a Christ-like being who could transmute his body cell by cell, illustrates a much higher plane or level of existence through which the human must pass in terms of going into the next chapter of life. And Jesus the Christ, as the way shower, he's showing us in not only the cloth, but the beautiful teaching he gives after resurrection to his disciples, both male and female, in this wonderful book, Pistis Sophia, that
Right.
the vesture or the shroud is that blueprint of the next stage of
Right.
our identity we have with the
Right.
cosmic creation.
And it also sort of fortifies us not to be afraid of the unpleasant, because crucifixion is something you don't even want to even contemplate. And yet when you see that somebody's overcome it and has actually said far greater things we should do, you, at least for me, it really makes me perk up and learn everything I can to fulfill that. And I don't think it's about capitulating my power either to someone else's experience or to an authority of any sort. I think that people should look on this and look on people like yourself who've had extraordinary experiences and have knowledge in the hard science, in social sciences, as being resources and allies to make their adventure in whichever way, in whichever religion or culture.
As you said so well, the words of the
Fuller.
gospel, greater things than these you can do, namely even greater miracles, for I go out to the Father. If we take on the inner nature of miracle working, living in an age of miracles, possibly with the reality that there may be even these energy bursts of atomic energy, we will be able to pass through this,
Right.
as shown in the life of the two Catholic sisters in Hiroshima during the atomic bomb, whose body was not touched or vaporized, but were able to preserve their body intact by the
Right.
deep prayers and use of the divine
Right.
names. And what I'm
Right.
saying here is to the
Right.
Academy, working with leading musicians and singers, we have found that there is a certain vibration in the ancient seed syllables or mantras of the divine names of God that somehow trigger higher states of consciousness, out of which the light manifests in the
Right.
aura around the body, which was
Right.
captured in these wonderful ancient pictures and descriptions that somehow figures into what could be called a cosmic creation that we as a planetary humanity will merge with as we realize that we are not alone in the universe, that we are surrounded by cosmic intelligence. And our
Right.
next step is to go into this higher state of creation.
Right. Right. Well, that is so exciting, and I like how you say it happens in all religions, in all cultures, but that there is a science to understand it deeper, and I think it's important to spiritual practice or whatever it is that makes one balanced. At least for me, I think is really important. That dynamic activity, whether it's political focus or focus on your family or wanting to do a good job in your career, that's one thing. But if you focus so much that you're out of balance, that to me is the highest that spiritual practice can
Well,
do.
I think we can
Move
say
you in balance.
in all disciplines, including medicine, the next stage is the medicine of light, capital L. The next stage of physics is the consciousness of light, capital L. We're all already at this point, this threshold of realizing there's something more to the creation of the human race.
Hmm.
And if we see Jesus the Christ as the way shower, then we ourselves are at the crossroads of history where we can go with the higher spiral into the body of light, the light body, or we can simply see ourselves as happenstance creation that has no consciousness control of the fabric of life and simply go down the drain with the flotsam and jetsam of creation. So
Right.
this series that you're doing on the cloth of Turin, which has
Yeah.
its earlier antecedent and many other artifacts, is so important to activate humanity to realize that we're living in an age of miracles,
Right.
an age of transmuting the physical into the transphysical. And this is
Right.
why we need both the scientific as well as the parascientific, the
Yes.
theological as well as the philosophical dimensions of seeing that this is a worldwide statement of realizing that we are not alone in the universe any more than this vestment is detached from the inner vestment of light, and thus the importance
Right.
of the new findings by Professor Flanti in Italy,
Yeah,
that
30
there is a
seconds.
second image that goes with the primary image.
Well, great. Well, JJ, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to more investigations with you, with other people, to say that we have more possibilities than we ever thought. So this is Paula Gloria. Thank you so much for joining me and JJ Hurtak from the Academy for Future Sciences in this discussion on the Shroud of Turin on Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. Thank you.
physicist Dr. Harry Gove is the inventor of the modern technique for carbon dating.
This bacterial contamination is something that the people who did the carbon dating were not aware of. In fact, I don't think anyone was aware of it until Garza Valdez discovered this possibility. Even if they had been aware of it, the cleaning procedure that they used would not have taken care of it. So there was no way that they could have made an absolutely unequivocal date of the shroud material.
With the results of the carbon dating now in question, scientists are already at work finding a way to separate the bioplastic coating from the original linen.
When the procedure for separating the cellulose from the bioplastic coating is well established, then I think we would be prepared to offer to do another carbon date on the shroud. Whether the offer will be accepted is not at all clear.
Profound is an article in the Journal of Optics published in April 2004 by two Italian scientists, Fanti and Maggiolo, that look at what is called a second image of the face, which is underneath the cloth. So we're not simply talking about a surface image, only one image that is the front view, but underneath the cloth itself, which was never permitted until recent time by Catholic authority, of a second image. However faint, it does show the outline of the face and very clear detail of the eyes.
How do they know there's a second image?
At the subsurface aspect of the cloth fibers, you will see a second image. Now this is very profound because it suggests something that is clearly recognizable in a book titled the Pistis Sophia, a copy of which you have for the audience, which means in the ancient Greek, faith and wisdom, a teaching of the risen Christ to his disciples as recorded in the late 2nd and 3rd century. These are disciples of disciples who speak of the risen Christ, who appears to them now in a risen state, explaining the symbolism of the vesture.
Isn't this the closest we have to the Divine Mother? The understanding of the feminine, the Pistis Sophia?
Pistis Sophia basically speaks of